I used to think silence kept the peace. For years, I bit my tongue through every holiday dinner, every cold glance, every time my parents spoke about duty and family, as if they hadn't forgotten what either word meant. But the night I found my grandfather on the floor, half frozen, alone, while they sailed somewhere warm, I felt something inside me break in a way it never had before. It wasn't just grief, it was recognition. I realized I'd spent my whole life cleaning up the messes they left behind, telling myself they didn't mean it, that family was worth forgiving. Not anymore. That night, as the sirens faded and my hands shook around his, I, Paula Whitmore, swore I would never stay silent again. Whatever warmth they thought they'd escaped to, they'd soon learn what cold really felt like. The drive from Boston took 5 hours, most of it through white silence. The snow was so heavy the headlights barely touched it, like the road itself didn't want to be found. I'd spent every mile rehearsing a reunion, my mother's arms, my father's laugh, the hum of the house I'd left behind. But when I finally pulled into the driveway, the only thing that greeted me was the sound of wind cutting through trees. The windows were dark, no lights, no music, no warmth. Inside, the air bit my skin. I flicked on the kitchen light, its glow sharp against the empty counters. The tile floor squeaked under my boots. On the refrigerator, a single note trembled in the draft from a cracked window. Gone sailing for the holidays. Check on Grandpa if you can. I read it twice. Then again. My chest went hollow. The clock on the wall ticked like a hammer in a tomb. Something faint broke the silence, a low sound. Weak and human. I followed it to the basement door. When I opened it, the cold rose like a living thing. The steps groaned under me. At the bottom, my flashlight caught the curve of a shoulder, a hand, a face I knew too well. Grandpa Henry lay curled on the concrete, lips purple, breath barely there. I dropped to my knees, pressed my coat over him, called for help with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. By the time the sirens faded, his fingers tightened weakly around mine. They don't know what they've done. Help me make it right. He slipped into silence before I could ask what he meant. When I turned back toward the house, the kitchen light still burned against the dark. The note on the fridge fluttered once, and the whole place seemed to exhale cold. I used to think cold was just weather. That night, I learned it could live inside people too. The hospital lights were so bright they hurt. The air smelled of bleach and metal, and the machines hummed in steady, merciless rhythm. I sat beside him, his hand small and light in mine, still faintly warm. The doctor stood at the foot of the bed, his voice clinical, detached. He's severely hypothermic. Another hour, and we'd be talking about arrangements, not recovery. I nodded, but the words barely landed. My training told me to focus on breathing, on regulation, on what I could control, but there was nothing controlled about watching someone you love turn gray under hospital lights. My grandfather's chest lifted shallowly beneath the sheets. His lips cracked from cold. When his eyes flickered open, they found me. Not with confusion, but with clarity so sharp it cut. It's not just the cold, Paula, he whispered, his voice trembling. It's what they took. I leaned closer. What did they take? Who? But his eyes drifted closed again, and silence swallowed the room. When the nurse came to hand me his records, I caught sight of a familiar name printed under the secondary account holder. Arthur Whitmore. My father. For a long moment, I couldn't breathe. He'd always bragged about supporting his father's care, about being the one who kept the old man comfortable, but the numbers told a different story. Later, I called the bank from the waiting area. The hold music was cheerful, cruelly out of place. When a voice finally answered, I recognized it, one of my former patients, now working as a teller. He hesitated when I asked about recent withdrawals. Then, quietly, he came in last week, looked confused, said he was opening a Christmas account for you. The words slid through me like ice water. He thought he was doing something kind, and my father turned that kindness into permission. When I returned to his room, the monitors pulsed softly. His hand had curled inward, like it was still holding onto a secret. I brushed my thumb across his knuckles and whispered, "You once pulled me back when I was drowning. I won't let them bury you beneath lies." Outside the window, snow kept falling, endless and white, reflecting the harsh glow of the hospital lights. I had no idea then how deep the frost went, or how far I'd have to dig to find what was buried beneath it. By the time I got back to the house, the night had settled into a silence too heavy to break. I turned up the thermostat, but the air stayed cold, the kind of cold that didn't just live in walls, it lived in memory. I crossed the living room, pressed the switch on the fireplace, and froze. The ashes inside were still faintly warm. Someone had burned something here recently. I knelt, sifting through the gray dust until a half-charred page surfaced, brittle and curled at the edges. The handwriting was unmistakable, slanted, deliberate. My grandmother's. If things ever feel wrong, it read, "Look for the box in the attic." The lower half was gone, eaten by flame, except for one smudged phrase still visible near the bottom. Scholarship, Paula's name. I stared at it, heart pounding. She'd been gone for more than a decade. Whatever she'd left, it wasn't meant to vanish in smoke, which meant someone had wanted it gone. I searched the drawers and cabinets, my hands shaking. Old photographs spilled out, my parents in their 30s, laughing under palm trees, standing on the deck of a cruise ship called Caribbean Star. The date scrawled on the back matched the winter Grandpa first started getting sick. "You can't sail away from guilt," I muttered, closing the album. In the bottom drawer of his old desk, I found a stack of tax forms. One line stopped me cold. Whitmore Legacy Fund, Education Grant, Custodian, Arthur Whitmore. My name sat beneath it, a scholarship in my honor, something I'd never heard of, never seen a cent from. My father had taken ownership of it years ago. The fund wasn't lost. It had been redirected. I sat back, the burnt letter still trembling in my hand. The writing glimmered faintly in the lamplight. The ink warped but defiant. "Look for the box." I looked up at the ceiling, at the narrow wooden hatch that led to the attic. The wind outside moaned through the window frame, scattering a handful of ash across the floor. It felt almost like a signal. They thought the fire would erase the past. They forgot. Ashes still whisper. 2 days after the ambulance, the hospital had settled into a rhythm that was almost cruel in its normalcy. Nurses changing shifts, coffee cooling in paper cups, machines breathing for the people who couldn't. When my phone rang, I stepped into the hallway to answer. The woman's voice on the line was polite, uncertain, the kind reserved for bad news. "Mrs. Whitmore, your father submitted a property transfer form last week. Power of attorney signed December 21st. For a moment, I didn't understand what I was hearing. December 21st was the day Grandpa slipped in and out of consciousness, the day the nurses had to spoon water between his lips. I asked her to send me a copy. When the email came through, I opened the attachment and saw the signature, crooked, hesitant, ink bleeding into the paper like it had been written by a trembling hand. A hand that couldn't have possibly known what it was signing. I printed the form and brought it to the hospital. His eyes were closed, his breathing thin. But when I whispered, "They took your house," a single tear slid from the corner of his eye. He squeezed my fingers weakly. And that was all the confirmation I needed. That afternoon, I drove to Vermont Trust myself. The bank smelled like wax and old carpet. Behind the counter stood Mark, a man I hadn't seen in years. One of my old patients who'd once sat in my office talking about the silence after loss. He recognized me instantly, and his expression shifted from surprise to guilt. He didn't know what he was signing. He said softly, glancing over his shoulder, "Your father told me it was a holiday insurance form." Outside, the air felt sharper than before. I barely noticed the drive back until my phone buzzed again, this time from the doctor. They'd finished Grandpa's lab tests. "His carbon monoxide levels are high," the doctor said. "When was the furnace last serviced?" The words hung there, heavy. I hadn't touched the furnace switch since arriving. The thought formed slowly. Horribly, the heat hadn't failed. Someone had turned it off. That night, I sat on the floor of my childhood bedroom, surrounded by photographs, smiling faces, Christmas trees, the illusion of warmth. My father's hand resting over my mother's, both grinning at the camera like people who believed themselves good. People don't become monsters overnight, I thought. They melt, slowly, until all that's left is convenience. By morning, I'd decided. The next call I made wouldn't be to the hospital. It would be to a lawyer. The next morning, I sat beside Grandpa's bed, watching the steady rise and fall of his chest. The beep of the monitor was the only sound keeping time. As I traced the wrinkles on his hand, a memory surfaced. Years ago at Lake Champlain, the day I slipped through the ice, he jumped in after me without hesitation, his fingers locking around mine, pulling me to the surface. Now it was my turn to pull him back. Only this time, the water was invisible, and the ice was made of lies. When he drifted back to sleep, I opened his old email account. The password was still the same, one of those sentimental phrases grandparents never change. Inside were records from his bank, each withdrawal logged neatly over the past 8 months. Every note read the same: Whitmore Properties, Maintenance, Whitmore Properties, my father's company, the one that had gone under 2 years ago. There was no mistake. He'd been siphoning from his father's retirement to patch a sinking ship. I opened the attachments, receipts, statements, and one file scanned long ago. It was a document I'd never seen before, labeled Whitmore Legacy Fund. My father's signature sat at the bottom beside a title, Custodian, and just below it, in smaller print, Primary Beneficiary, Paula Whitmore. For a second, I couldn't move. He'd used my name to steal from his father. The fund wasn't for me. It was leverage, proof that he could turn generosity into ownership, family into profit. I whispered the words before I even realized I'd said them. You used me to steal from him. I opened my laptop and began typing an email to the state's community legal office. I have evidence of elder financial abuse involving my parents. I need advice on how to proceed without pressing charges. Yet, before dawn, I returned to Grandpa's room. The nurses had dimmed the lights, and the world outside was still buried in white. I sat beside him, holding his hand, and whispered what I'd once promised myself I wouldn't repeat. You saved me once from drowning. I'll pull us both out this time. His eyes stayed closed, but a single tear slid down. Slow and quiet. When I looked toward the window, the sky was turning faintly gold. Snow was still falling, but somewhere above the clouds, the light was breaking through. The cold wasn't just outside. It was in the lies we called love, and I was done freezing. I hadn't slept in 2 nights. The house felt alive, whispering in its creaks, holding its breath with me. Before dawn, I put on gloves, grabbed my flashlight, and climbed to the attic, where my grandmother once prayed every morning. The air was thick with dust and old pine. My light swept across forgotten boxes until it caught a wooden statue of the Virgin Mary, her chipped collar shadowed in grime. When I brushed away the dust, something shifted beneath my palm. A loose board. Beneath it lay a walnut chest carved with M&H, 1967. I opened it slowly. Inside, wrapped in linen, was a letter in my grandmother's handwriting. If kindness fails, truth will defend you. The house is Henry's till his last breath. The fund is Paula's when the time is right. I knelt, shaking. Beneath the letter were documents. The original power of attorney signed in 2014, clean and firm. Receipts showing transfers to Whitmore Properties LLC, and a notarized fund contract naming me as beneficiary. My father hadn't stumbled into corruption. He had built it. At the bottom of the box was a USB, wrapped in tissue, with a note in her handwriting. Arthur doesn't know this exists. Keep it safe. I plugged it in. Static hissed. Then voices. Hers, my grandfather's, and his. If we transfer now, you'll save me from bankruptcy. Arthur, she said. This isn't yours. It will be soon. I closed the laptop, clutching the USB. Grandma, I found your truth. Now I'll make them face it. A gust burst through a crack in the roof, blowing the attic door wide. A folded paper slid from the chest to my feet. Faded ink read, "They will come home soon." It wasn't about the weather. By afternoon, the storm had quieted. I stood at the window as headlights cut through the snow. My parents stepped from the car, tanned and smiling, their laughter slicing through the cold. My mother waved. "Oh, Paula, you're here already?" I sat by the fire, its warmth deliberate. "I've been here," my father chuckled, resting a hand on my shoulder. "Guess you saw the note. We figured you'd check on him." "I did," I said. He almost froze to death. Her smile faltered. "Honey, don't exaggerate. He probably forgot the heat again. It was turned off manually, the main switch." Their faces stiffened. "What exactly are you implying?" my father asked. "When did he sign the property papers?" I said. "Before Christmas," my mother blurted. He said he didn't need the house anymore. He was unconscious that week. The air froze solid. She realized what she'd admitted. I took out the USB and papers, placing them on the table. I found Grandma's box. That was private, my father muttered. No, I said. That was evidence. I played the recording. His voice filled the room. If we transfer now, you'll save me from bankruptcy. He staggered back, color draining from his face. You went through hell to find this? No. Dad, you built that hell yourself. That recording isn't admissible in court, he snapped. Maybe not in court, I said. But it's enough for a mediation case. And a social worker already has a copy. Silence. My mother sobbed. We just wanted to keep the family afloat. By drowning the only man who ever kept us alive, I said. I pointed to the fire. You left it out. I thought I'd light it again. They said nothing. My mother cried quietly. My father turned away, smaller somehow. I stepped outside into the freezing air. Snow swirled beneath the porch light. Behind me, the fire glowed through the window, painting the room gold. For years, I'd been the quiet one, the listener, the peacekeeper. But silence has a breaking point, and tonight, it broke. I sent the message that morning. Dinner at 7. All of us. By evening, the table was set. White linen, 2 glasses of wine, a single candle flickering in the middle. No food, only a beige folder waiting like an uninvited guest. They arrived trying to act normal. My mother forced a smile. At least we're together for Christmas dinner. I met her eyes. Yes, together. Finally honest. The candlelight trembled, showing every flaw they tried to hide. I opened the folder. The original power of attorney, the forgery, the scholarship contract, bank statements, the USB. Each paper landed like a strike. My father snapped. You went too far. I stayed still. No. You did. Then came the sharp tap of a cane. Grandpa stood in the doorway, pale but upright. Sit down. Arthur! My father froze. Grandpa's voice shook but didn't break. You didn't just steal money. You stole from who you used to be. My mother sobbed. We only wanted to fix things. Grandpa's reply cut through her tears. You fix a roof. Ellen, not people. Silence filled the room. The fire crackled. For the first time, the house wasn't cold. It burned with truth. A week later, we met inside the small chapel of St. Mary's. Morning light filtered through the stained glass windows, painting the wooden floor with soft colors that didn't quite reach anyone's face. The round table in front of us held no papers yet, only silence. My grandfather sat beside me, his cane resting against the pew. Across from us were my parents, smaller now, quieter. The lawyer and Father Allen, my grandfather's oldest friend, completed the circle. The clock ticked, the heater hummed, no one spoke. When Father Allen finally did, his voice was steady but kind. We're not here to punish, but to repair what's broken. I placed the folder on the table. My grandfather nodded once, confirming every page. My parents bowed their heads, both pale. My father's voice cracked. We just wanted to survive. The priest's eyes lifted. At the cost of your father's life? The lawyer read the decision. They would repay what they took, forfeit all guardianship rights, attend supervised elder care counseling, and a written notice would be sent to Elder Protection Vermont. No protest. My father only nodded. My grandfather whispered, we correct, not destroy. It was the gentlest sentence, and the hardest one to live with. When it was over, my mother reached for me, her hands trembling. Paula, can we ever fix this? I met her eyes. Not fix. Learn. I took my grandfather's arm, and together we stepped into the winter air. The cold met my skin, sharp but clean. Behind us, the church doors closed softly. He said, they'll live, and that's punishment enough. I nodded. Justice doesn't need applause. It just needs to exist. 3 months passed before the world began to soften again. Spring came late to Vermont. The snow melted in slow silver streaks along the roof, dripping like a clock, measuring forgiveness. The mornings were quiet now. Sunlight filled the small house by Lake Champlain, where my grandfather and I lived. He sat by the window with the newspaper, a cup of tea steaming beside him. I made another for myself, the scent of chamomile drifting through the room. Life had found a calm rhythm. My parents still lived in town. They avoided words, avoided me. But each month they sent what they owed, steady payments, small reparations wrapped in silence. Sometimes I'd see them at the market. My mother would nod. My father would look down. For once, their silence wasn't deceit, it was acceptance. That afternoon, sunlight spilled across the floor, turning everything gold. My grandfather looked up from his paper. "You didn't just save my life, Paula," he said softly. "You saved our soul." I smiled, watching the light shimmer on the lake. "You told me warmth isn't about heat, it's about people staying." He nodded. "Then you've given me the warmest winter, later." I wrote in my notebook, "Some homes freeze in silence, some thaw with truth." I came home for Christmas and found more than a dying man. I found what it means to stay human. Outside, the lake glittered under the pale sun. Steam rose from the mug in my hands. Somewhere nearby, a bird sang, the first note of a long, gentle spring.